Hey guys, this is miicrow. I wanted to go over everything for the Legacy of Crassus event. There are a decent amount of changes for this event, but overall I'd say this event from most people's eyes is a miss. We were kind of hoping for something bigger, something better in terms of PvP balance for now, and I would say if you have not played New World recently, this isn't a great time to come back, but if you are playing New World, there's definitely some opportunities here to make some gold. The event itself does feature a basically, old BIS for Great Axe. I think people still consider thwarting strikes to generally be BIS. Thwarting counter is also kind of debated because it's like 20% versus 7%, but both those options are good. You're able to get this Great Axe from the event, which is super, super solid. You're also able to get like a decent amount of other gear pieces. They just aren't super fantastic, to be honest. The heavy chest is okay, has health and vig, but nothing else on here is just super great. There are craft mods that are very good to just get and then sell. You can get refreshing on there, sacred. You can get freedom, which is really, really noteworthy on top of squirming vines, so you can get that shirking fort. You can basically get all those really expensive crash mods like refreshing move, a rogue from this event, and that just overall just make you a good amount of coin. Additionally, you can get this golden legion pickaxe to drop from the event, and if you salvage that, you can get prismatic ingots, which are also a good source of gold. So it's just a good event to do just to gain gold in general, and is like super awesome that the devs kind of put something out there to just gain gold in, although it is recycled content, so kind of a bittersweet thing there. There is a change that is coming to New World that is very impactful for the current meta. A heavy is getting a massive nerf with the dodge being increased from 50 to 55. This is going to not allow heavy to do triple dodges with a hardy anymore, unlike every other class. So heavy is going to be limited to double dodge. This means you could either drop hardy or you can take advantage of some inherent perk on your kit, like critical comeback for greatsword, for spear, which I think is the one that's a little bit more interesting because SNS Spear is just hard meta right now. It's a little bit more powerful than Greatsword in most people's eyes. You have evasive maneuvers, which reduces your dodge. You also have integrated crits, which gives you stam when you crit. So effectively, Spear is still going to be able to quote-unquote triple dodge. You just need to land a hit before you go for the triple dodge, and you'll still be able to do so. So overall, I don't see this change affecting the meta as super, like a lot. Like for any build that's running a shield, you probably still want to be running heavy because if you run medium with a shield, you kind of sacrifice a lot of armor, and you effectively only can use the shield otherwise, or your main hand with the shield out. Otherwise, you feel very, very squishy compared to other builds. And if you are playing heavy, you could take advantage of passives like these to get value. You could also take advantage of things like regeneration serums, which give you flat stam per second, which will allow you to get that triple dodge anyway. You could take advantage of things like energizing rune glass to give you one extra stamina, so you can do a dodge, do a hit, and then you could do a double dodge after that. Or you could use ice pollen that which will proc off of this and just give you flat stam as well. So there's like a few like creative ways to basically get around this problem and still be tanky. But overall, I would assume this is going to be effective, and a lot of people are going to be moving from heavy to medium. IGVG is kind of interesting to see where that goes. I think you can go either way. Great Axe will go back to medium, even though heavy was BIS last patch and no one played it. But those builds will be on medium once again, very likely. There's also a change here where bow is getting its damage increased in both PvE and unfortunately PvP, as confirmed by this Discord post here, where the devs now realize, I don't know if they realized before, probably sleeping under a rock, they didn't realize it before, to be honest, but it was Christmas, so kind of give them a small break there, where elemental damage was not scaling correctly for the bow in particular, like the artifact bow, and that is just overall just letting people do a lot more damage than they should be able to, and that is not going to be included with that patch. So bow is going to be doing an increased amount more damage. Boltcaster in particular is what I'm kind of referring to. Musket will also be doing more damage because they have that split scaling, and if you have a physical gem and you do a scaling to a different thing other than your primary stat, that damage that is split will not be reduced by the PvP modifier. This PvP modifier can be found within internal files, but for bow, it's about 14% right now, and that's just going to be getting increased. So bow's doing effectively about 16% more damage because you have to do the modifier is 1 over 1 minus that 0.14, which ends up being like 0.16% more damage, which basically just means bow's doing a lot of damage. Bow has a lot of passives on here. I actually calculated the difference, and I can show you guys that here. This is how much damage a bow is doing right now at this current patch. Also, shout out for Genie for making this tool. It's actually like super nice. But what they're effectively doing is they're buffing this base damage from 72 to 74. Small change, right? Basically means it takes 2.8, it does 2.8% more damage. There's not like a huge change there, but it is noteworthy that they are taking arguably the most powerful weapon in the game and are buffing it further, which doesn't feel great from a PvP perspective for most people. Because of this change, if you're PvEing, this is effectively not going to have much of an effect on you. If you're PvPing, to be honest, this change is a little overblown. A lot of people are like, "Oh my god, they buffed it again." It's like, yeah, they buffed it, but it's like a 2 to 3% buff, which isn't like the biggest deal in the world. But to give a perspective on like what 2 to 3% it is, if you look at featherweight here versus non-featherweight, this is 5%. So when you buff something by like another 3% more damage, it actually feels like really impactful. That's like half the value of featherweight just being added to bow again. So that kind of sucks. But overall, just going to be relatively annoying for a lot of PvP players, and not a lot of people are happy about that. Koya's knee guards got increased from 10% to 13%. My immediate reaction was like, wow, this is still not as useful as featherweight. A featherweight, you go from 29% to 34, whatever. You go to 35% more protection, so it's like 6% more damage mitigation. If you look at Koya, you have a few extra perks here compared to featherweight. You have Enchanted Ward Physical Aversion versus Refreshing Physical Aversion. Overall, Enchanted Ward Physical Aversion is generally a little bit preferred, but both of these are like solid for perk-wise. Physical Aversion kind of sucks, but they both have them, so it kind of equalizes out. If you want to compare the two, this is what Koya was before at 0.1. If we move this up to 0.3, it gets slightly more value than featherweight versus ranged, but we're talking like a fraction amount. This is like 6% mitigation now versus that bow build that we just talked about earlier. By the way, we keep talking about this base damage modifier. It turns out the lightning bow has 109% base damage. So for you guys that I just throw out numbers usually. I'm like, oh, just assume this build has at least 60% base damage. 60% is definitely the low side. This build has like 110% base damage, albeit it's not all consistent all the time, but you're hitting a very large amount of base damage. And at that moment, Koya is getting slightly more value, but it's getting like less than 1% more value, less than 0.5% more value. Is it worth running? Probably not. If this was buffed to like 20%, I would consider it, or like something kind of ridiculous like that, where it's like, it's letting me be twice as tanky compared to featherweight, but it's not working versus physical. It's like, yeah, that seems like a decent option to go for. But that's just like crazy how much they would need to buff this for it to actually be good versus the builds that are consistently hitting from a range damage side. Overall, I would not consider running Koya still. I would consider it to still be bad, but it is technically better than featherweight versus range, albeit it is super marginal. If they increased it to 12%, it'd be slightly worse. So it's like they picked the smallest amount possible to increase it to barely be better than featherweight here, which is just kind of silly in my opinion. I think they should definitely overtune this and then tune it back, because people just love featherweight right now, and to be honest, there's not a really good reason to not use it. And it's one of the reasons why people just feel so tanky right now, because light is effectively as tanky as medium is, or very nearly is so. So that's just kind of a problem inherent to New World with the artifact system that has been introduced lately. In terms of other things that are changing, Void Gauntlet is getting a damage increase. Void Gauntlet's still going to suffer from the same flaws. It inherently can't chase someone. You could completely counter Void Gauntlet by holding the S key, the W key, the A key, the D key. You can run around in circles. You could turn your mouse off and just walk in a general direction. They won't be able to chase you down. They have no chase ability. They put their Void Blade away. They can't pull it out for a very long period of time. The weapon just inherently sucks, and still will suck. So even though they're buffing it, props to AGS for trying to buff it, I guess. You're going to have to do a little bit more than just tune the damage number on this weapon. It just fundamentally does not work right now. The only easy way to make this fix, I think, would be just to remove the cooldown altogether, making kind of like Flamethrower. You could pull it out whenever you want, and then it would be okay. But I still think it would suffer in some aspects, and would also inherently make Void Gauntlet weird, because then you want to get the kind of crit bonus to apply on all your ranged attacks. So it's there's not a really perfect way to buff this Void Gauntlet thing right now, but it's just not where it needs to be for it to be meta. Fire Staff, they reduced the movement speed. This is going to feel kind of nice. Empowering Fireball, they reduced the damage by 4%. Kind of laughable from a change, to be honest, for Fire Staff. Definitely could have received a lot bigger of a change. I think if they nerfed Fire Staff by 5 to 10% damage across the board, it would still likely be played all the time, because Pestilence is just that good at enabling Fire Staff. Pestilence did get nerfed here. They are reducing the outgoing healing reduction from 5% to 2.5%. So that will help a little bit, but fundamentally, Pestilence just gives you ult charge faster than any other artifact in the game, because you have an extra dot tick just passively applying. On top of this, outgoing healing reduction, on top of incoming healing reduction. Inherently, it's just a super, super strong artifact. and AGS keeps going about this. We're like, oh, we're gonna nerf BB because BB has a high win rate. It's not because BB's actually good. It's because Pestilence is insane from a passive utility standpoint. And there's not a good reason to not run Pestilence on a lot of builds. A lot of the times they're thinking about, hey, what offhand should I go here? And it's like, I could just slap on Pestilence. I'll just inherently get more value than any other weapon in the game. And it's just kind of stupid. A Flail, deflecting frailty, so it wasn't applying its effect to allies. It feels kind of sad at this point. If you look at Flail, when it launched, Arcane Vortex wasn't working. It was bugged. It was giving you a permanent haste. It also, the accelerated advantage wasn't working. Then they look at Smite and it's like, oh, deflected frailty is also not working. It's like, great, you guys released this weapon like 4 months ago and clearly QA failed again. Like, it just, nothing was working once again on this weapon. Also, crowded, like, Warding Blood clearly is not working from what I've been playing around with it. It's just like, it's super inconsistent. Like, the effect doesn't even show visually. It goes to multiple people, even though it says it's only going to go to one. Like, it's just kind of a nightmare overall, in terms of best friends, that is. But it's just like, this weapon is just like, feels like it's an alpha stage still. It still doesn't feel like it's really fleshed out. It does no damage, but it has really good utility, so it's in a weird spot, and this is definitely going to make it have more utility. It'll be interesting to see if people can get this by walking in and out of the kind of zone, but that will yet to be determined. It should reduce the damage in PvP a lot again, so if you don't have Cleanse Pod up, like, you're going to probably be at weaken cap, and you're just overall not going to be doing a ton of damage from a melee perspective, like in a clump fight, especially in a war. An OPR Flail is not really popular, so this is not really a big change. Same in 3v3. Flail inherently just doesn't do significant damage, so it tends to fall off in other modes, but that's noteworthy as well. Otherwise, there's kind of general PvE fixes. None of these are super kind of impactful from my eyes. They're kind of leveling up things. The biggest one by far, I think, is you're able to swap to purple now. If you weren't able to swap to purple before, you'll be able to do that, and that is kind of nice. And with that being said, let me know if you guys have any questions or anything like that. Leave a comment, or just show up in the Discord, ask something there. I will be hanging out. I try to answer all the questions I can. We're kind of popping in there. Or if you want something that's like more personal and kind of more live, just check me out on Twitch. I stream basically every day at this point from around like 6 PST, 7 PST. A lot of wars, and I do a little bit of post-war stuff with PvE, PvP, OPR, etc. With that being said, I'll see you guys later.